Hello again. I can't believe it's been about 20 days since my last video. Time really does fly. But I am making a new video, and this one is on the subject of word hijacking, which is a fascinating concept. It's something that pretty much everyone does. It's kind of a human thing that we do, kind of a shortcut in the way we communicate with each other. For example, the word diet. Let's say you and a friend get together and you want to start a new diet. Let's say you want to start a diet that is low in carbohydrates. So what happens is you and your friend start that diet, and then maybe one day you go up to your friend and you say, so how's your diet? How's your diet coming along? And your friend doesn't need extra information in order to understand what you're talking about. You don't have to say, how's the low carb diet going? Even though the word diet is a general word and doesn't necessarily mean something good and it doesn't necessarily mean something bad, you need more information to describe what kind of diet it is. But yet within this context, when you're talking to your friend intuitively knows what you're talking about. Because essentially what you've done in a benign way is taken a word and kind of created a personalized context for it, and then you use that to help hasten your communication with someone else. Totally normal, benign use of language, essentially. Now let me give you another example of word hijacking that's a little less benign. There was a man named Marshall Applewhite, and he was the leader of the Heaven's Gate cult, who tragically committed mass suicide in 1997. Now, there is a YouTube video called, I think it's called the Heaven's Gate Database, and it has tons of videos that were made by this cult. And especially, I would especially recommend the last video that Marshall Applewhite makes, because he essentially goes over his entire religion, his entire theology, and explains why they're doing what they did. And then when you watch that video, he has a perfect example of word hijacking. And what he does is he says that if you join his religion, so to speak, his cult, and you do what he says, and you listen to him, and you learn from him, and you join his kind of group, and eventually if you commit mass suicide with him, that you are going to transcend humanity and go to the next evolutionary level. And he says it a lot. He uses that term, evolutionary transcendence or something like that. He says you're gonna go to the next evolutionary level, which is quite ironic, because one of the few ways to not evolve as a human being is to die. Because we're always evolving. We're evolving in our personalities, we're evolving physically, we're in a constant state of change. Which could be considered evolution. And even from a scientific perspective, the word evolution talks about natural selection, which means passing your genetics down the tree of life. And you have to survive long enough to have offspring in order to be considered evolving in a scientific context. But if you commit suicide, that's the exact opposite of evolution. Yet that's what that's the word that this man is using to describe his process, evolution. And that's what happens with word hijacking a lot of times, is the redefinition of the word ends up being the complete opposite of the original word. And so what Marshall Applewhite did is he institutionalized that word. See, and that's how it becomes not benign, like in the diet example, is that now you have institutionalized this word. If you've created a culture around this wrong definition of the word, and you're using it as almost like a currency. You're saying, well, I'm going to take that term evolution and I'm going to keep it for myself. And no one's actually evolving on the planet Earth who doesn't involve themselves in my institution, in my culture. So it's very aggressive. It's a very aggressive tactic to try to control others by using language. So he used the term evolution. Now, with the Jehovah's Witnesses, they use a lot of terms that they hijack and that they redefine. And I'm only going to talk about a couple of them. The first one that comes to mind for me is the word truth. And if you hang around with Jehovah's Witnesses for any extended period of time, you will eventually start to hear this word being used in a very strange context. Jehovah's Witnesses will say stuff like, this person has left the truth, and this person has come into the truth. And they'll tell stories about how they learned the truth and came into the truth. And what they mean by that is people that are on the inside of their religion and people are on the outside of their religion. So if you're on the outside of your religion, or if you left their religion, that means you're not in the truth. And it's a very subtle way to gain control over someone's mind. It's part of a huge arsenal of undue influence, is what it's called. And this is just one of those mechanisms of the machine, so to speak, is to target words like truth. Truth is a very big word that can be used, and then take it. So once again, it's like the evolution guy with Marshall Applewhite. He took the word evolution and said, well, this is mine, and only if you want to be considered to be evolving, then you have to do what I say, and you have to be part of my group. So it's the same thing with the Jehovah's Witnesses and truth. See, they're saying truth is ours. We have it, and we can give it to you as long as you come and be part of our institution. So once again, they have institutionalized this word and created a culture out of it. And what's interesting, just like with the Marshall Applewhite example, is that the word truth has been redefined to a point where it doesn't actually mean what it's supposed to mean. See, truth is something you can prove. It's something that is self-evident, something that is easily provable through evidence. But if you really look at the Jehovah's Witness religion and you get all their doctrines out point by point, they're a faith-based organization. They have to have faith, ultimately, yes. They do not have evidence for their claims. That's not truth. So what they're describing as truth is the exact opposite. Now there's another word that if you hang out with Jehovah's Witnesses, you will hear quite often in a strange context, and that is the concept the world, or the term the world. Now, to an outsider, the world might mean a globe. It might mean, the whole earth. It might mean all the people on the earth. There's different contexts for it. But what the Jehovah's Witnesses will say is a worldly person is someone who's not part of their religion. So what they're saying is that they are not part of the world. That's what they're saying. They're saying that they can somehow separate themselves and be considered not part of the world, to the point where they can actually just point at someone who's not a member of their religion and say, well, that person is of the world, and then point at someone in their religion and say, that person is not of the world. And once again, that term, the way that they're using it, does not describe what it actually means. If you're on this planet Earth and you are breathing, you're definitely part of this world. If you're a rock on this planet, you're part of this world. There's no way to logically not be part of the world. So what they've done is they've taken this term, and once again, they have said, see, we're the special ones, and if you want to be special like us and not be part of the world, well, you have to be part of our culture, and you have to be part of our institution. So once again, they've institutionalized this word that they hijacked. Now the final word that I want to talk about is a very important word that the Jehovah's Witnesses use, and it's the word spiritual. Now, like the word diet, there can be good spirituality and there can be bad spirituality. Just like a diet, you can have a bad diet and you can have a good diet. But what the witnesses do, which is very curious, is that they basically take that word, spirituality, for themselves, and they say spirituality is always good. See, what they say is if you're not spiritual, that's bad. And if you are spiritual, that's something good. And of course, They take it for themselves, and they say, really, the only way you can be spiritual is you have to be a Jehovah's Witness, you have to do the stuff that we do, you have to believe the way that we do, you have to be involved in the regimen or the institution. So once again, they have institutionalized this word spiritual, and to the point where they have defined it as always good, which is not true. There's such a thing as bad spirituality, and there's such a thing as good spirituality. Let me give you an example of good spirituality. I can go to a forest, or I can go to a lake, or I can go somewhere in nature, and I can feel connected to that place, and I can be filled with a spiritual feeling just by being out in nature and feeling connected to it. That's considered a spiritual experience. But to a Jehovah's Witness, that it's kind of a what they would consider it as a pseudo spirituality. But if I went into that same forest and I was a Jehovah's Witness and I praised God for creating the forest, now that would be spiritual according to them. And there's something very interesting about this word that they have been using that I have noticed. Because if you spend any extended period of time with these people, you will see that this word spiritual that they're using essentially means loyalty to the organization. The more loyal you are and the more things you do for them, the more spiritual you are. Like, for instance, when people go to their headquarters in Bethel and they take a vow of poverty, and they go there and they live in very simple means and do hard work, long hours for little to no pay. Those people are considered very spiritual. And so spirituality seems to be a barometer for how much you've done for them and how loyal you are, which is crazy because the word spiritual means the immaterial or the not material. So when you go to a meeting and you sit in a physical building, in a physical chair, listening to someone talking from a podium, that's not spiritual, that's physical. There's a physical building, there's a physical chair, there's a physical person in there talking to you. If you are at home and you're studying the watchtower, well, that watchtower is physical paper and physical ink and had to be printed out by physical printing presses. So all of that is not spiritual because it's physical, the opposite of spiritual. So once again, we have this pattern. We have this pattern of when an institution will hijack a word or a concept, what it ends up being is the exact opposite of what it's supposed to mean. It's an ironic phenomenon. So the reason why I'm making this video is I'm trying to help Jehovah's Witnesses and non-Jehovah's Witnesses understand this concept so that you can see what's going on. Because what you have to do in order to see what's going on in the organization that you are part of, you have to use real definitions for words. You have to untwist the words that have been hijacked, and you will start seeing that it doesn't make sense. And then a lot of it just doesn't make sense because what's happened is that a culture has risen up, and it's an isolation culture. And so what they've done is they've created their own language and their own definitions for words. And they're using those words, special words like truth and the world and spirituality and evolution. And they're using all these powerful words and taking them for themselves and then doling them out as if they're like currency that they can reward others with. And once you untwist those words and see that that's what these groups do, and it's not just the Jehovah's Witnesses. That's why I gave the Heaven's Gate example, because it's a very common tactic when you go into any cult, any institution. You will see words that come up more often than other words or concepts that have obviously been redefined in order to establish control over the membership. So My last video did really well, the one on psychological violence, and I really appreciate all the likes and all the subscribes and the comments. I really enjoy it. It's been awesome. So if you could do the same, subscribe, like, comment, share, I would be very appreciative and grateful, and I will continue to make videos. So you guys have a nice day.